symbolism of polarization, of oppression and competition, and social and environmental degradation. I was interested that the piece of music that Ariane played, one of them was called Who Will Win the Argument? And I'm hoping that we can find ways to come to unity without argument. I grew up with a lot of argument coming from an Irish and Croatian background. So lots of times that the conversations we try to have on the topics of the day become stuck and polarized. The global governing body of the Baha'i Faith, the Universal House of Justice, in a message written just 2 weeks ago, talked about this precipice where humanity finds itself. It said the global challenges now facing our humanity are a severe test of its willingness to put aside short-term self-interest and come to terms with this stark spiritual and moral reality that there's but one interconnected human family and it shares one precious homeland. So many people feel that we are at a critical transition period in the affairs of the world. It's the conviction of every Baha'i that humanity is approaching the crowning stage in a millennial-long process, which has brought it from its collective infancy to the threshold of maturity, a stage that will witness the unification of the human race. But not unlike the individual who passes through the unsettled yet promising period of adolescence, during which latent powers and capacities come to light, humankind as a whole is in the midst of an unprecedented transition. We're witnessing a humanity struggling to come of age. We see in this transition two fundamental processes. One is destructive in nature, while the other is integrative. But both serve to carry humanity forward, each in its own way, along the path leading to its full maturity. The forces of disintegration tend to sweep away barriers that block humanity's progress, and they open spaces for the process of integration to draw diverse groups together and offer new opportunities for collaboration and cooperation. And of course, tonight is one, or this afternoon is one example. If we look at history, we see that humanity has already organized itself in progressively larger unities, starting with family groups, clans, tribes, city-states, nations, and now we're inexorably moving towards our unity as a human race. All of these stages have been propelled by religions brought by messengers or manifestations of God, who brought wisdom and teachings in conformity with the needs of the time in which they appeared. If we look at each of these periods or stages as the chapters of a book, we see that in essence, they're one. I know as workers in interfaith understanding, as many of you are, you've discovered many values and teachings that are similar to each other, that there is indeed an underlying unity to the message all of the manifestations brought. Indeed, the word religion from the Latin religio means to unify, to tie, to bind. I'd like to share a personal anecdote with you. Many years ago, as a university student, I took a course in art history. I knew very little about art or history for that matter, but I came to understand there were peaks in art history, full of great works such as sculpture, paintings, music, architecture, literature, theater, and the like. These peaks were often followed by less fertile and creative artistic periods. It was only after I'd studied the Baha'i teachings on the progressive nature of revelation that I understood that these peaks of great achievement in art had appeared as a result of the appearance of the various great world religions. And they appeared at the stage in each one we would call its golden age. I was fortunate, and I'm sure many of you have also been, to see some evidence as you travel of these wonderful artistic achievements. I'm thinking of, for example, Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is a UNESCO World Site and reflects a fusion of both Buddhist and Hindu influences, or the impact which the revelation of the Prophet Muhammad, which had its birth in the 7th century AD, had not only in the Middle East, but on the great artistic achievements of the Renaissance in Europe. For example, in those beautiful Christian cathedrals, which you see everywhere. And there's growing evidence too that the American continents were influenced by holy ones who came to the indigenous peoples whose teachings left their traces. And we are discovering the traces of these great civilizations that evolved. However, we know that for all the wonderful truths that religion has brought to humanity, the forces of materialism have been growing. And many people, for various reasons, such as corruption in religion, are rejecting its influence altogether. Recently, I read a quote from Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith, who stated, "The more material education advances, the more competitive is the race in aggression and injustice. But spiritual education is the cause of competition in praiseworthy actions and the acquisition of human perfections. We hope that day by day these injustices will diminish and the spiritual virtues increase." We know, of course, that the progress of society must be both material and spiritual. We're certainly not now in a golden age of civilization. We're at a time when many of our social structures are disintegrating. The degradation of the environment is a huge concern, and wars and prejudices and inequities continue. And yet tonight, or this afternoon, we want to speak about unity, building unity, which is in essence about building a new civilization. As I learned, the history of art teaches us that religion has been a great and unifying influence on building civilization in the past. Perhaps we need to revisit the very conception of religion to see how it can now help build a unified global civilization. Last year in April, the Universal House of Justice wrote to the Baha'is about a new way to view religion. They said, implied in all this, it was a conception of religion very different from those holding sway in the world at large. A conception which recognized religion as the potent force propelling an ever-advancing civilization. It was understood that such a civilization would not appear spontaneously of its own accord. Baha'is believe that true religion can transform hearts and overcome distrust, and that it's the mission of the people of this age to build that new united world civilization. We're all invited to become protagonists in this great task, one which will take many generations and centuries to develop, but in which universal participation will be needed. It will take each person's efforts to personally transform themselves and at the same time to contribute to collective transformation. Baha'u'llah stated that the purpose for which mortal men have from utter nothingness stepped into the realm of being is that they may work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. The World Baha'i Community, now 178 years old, has been learning about these society-building powers inherent in religion. The community itself has gone through several stages in its own development. In the beginning, it was mostly individuals who would travel and teach their faith, much like the early disciples of Christ. But as a religion that does not have clergy, about 100 years ago, a period of building democratically elected institutions to guide the development of the faith began, based on the teachings of the central figures of the faith. And this administrative order has helped guide the Baha'is through a series of plans to go to every country of the earth and establish communities. We are now, as a Baha'i community, entering a new series of global plans that began last April and will last a period of a full 25 years. The aim will be to learn about releasing the society-building powers inherent in religion that we've talked about, and how to build communities both spiritually and materially prosperous. The first plan will be a 9-year plan beginning in April. A series of conferences will be held in every region of the world, likely several in Alberta, in the next few months to gain further insight into the nature of this spiritual enterprise unfolding and of what is required. The Baha'i community greatly welcomes anyone from all walks of life who cherishes this long-term vision of the oneness of humanity and its future to labor together and collaborate, and certainly welcomes co-workers like yourselves in these conferences. I thought to speak now practically about just a few features of the framework for action which the Baha'i community is working within, and I'm sure our second speaker will also touch on that. And in particular, to speak a little bit about some practical ways that we might promote unity. So that it's this underlying principle, how do we learn to work together? The more cooperation and mutual assistance are manifested, the more will human society advance in prosperity and progress. So it's about collective systematic action. I'm particularly interested in the idea that much change will start with elevating our conversations with each other. How do we actually learn to collaborate? In our very individualistic society of the West, we no doubt have many skills to learn. Yesterday I was talking with a neighbor that I ran into as I was walking our dog. And she was saying to me that she belongs to a group of women, 5 women, I think she said, and all of them, they get together on Zoom and they all have had differing opinions, for example, about the vaccination for COVID-19. And she spoke longingly of the need we all have to respect each other and to see the humanity in each other and not to allow differing ideas to divide us. It was just a small example. So the power of meaningful conversations to find that precious point of unity, to learn to really listen and hear one another. They're all areas of learning that we need to engage in. Another question as we strive to create unity, how do we avoid partisanship and contest for worldly power? How do we focus instead on transcending differences, harmonizing perspectives, and not getting into the argument and the polarization and getting stuck? Consultation is a concept that the Baha'is are learning about. It's been something that we've been learning for a long time. We don't claim to have perfected it. We believe there's an art to consultation, but it is practiced in all our community building activities. This is just a quote about it. Consultation may be seen as collective search for truth. Participants in a consultative process see reality from different points of view, and as these views are examined and understood, clarity is achieved. In this conception of the collective investigation of reality, truth is not a compromise between opposing interest groups, nor does the desire to exercise power over another animate participants in the consultative process. What they seek, however, is the power of unified thought and action In the process of consultation, we rely on rationality and science as essential for understanding. We're very conscious of how the forces of materialism are at work around us all, and our eyes are wide open to the many injustices that persist in the world. Yet we're equally clear-sighted about the creative power of unity and humanity's capacity for altruism. Baha'is know that we cannot build such a civilization by ourselves. All people are needed. Baha'is themselves share our beliefs liberally with others. At the same time, we remain respectful of the freedom of conscience of every soul, and we never impose our standards on anyone. And finally, and again, I've only picked a few of the elements of the framework. As we are working on systematic community building, this advances to an alternating rhythm of action and reflection. So we're constantly in a learning mode to learn by doing and then share lessons with each other. So on your poster that you had for the program today, you included the quote, "So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth." So humanity is at a stage where it's recognizing its vulnerability, and it seems more conscious of the need for collaboration to address global challenges. Yet there are these lingering habits of contest, self-interest, prejudice, and closed-mindedness that hinder the movement towards unity. So together, let's talk about and learn about nurturing in every place communities of common purpose that recognize the power of unity to heal and transcend. And to just end my portion, I've asked for a very short video, which comes from the UK, their Office of Public Affairs. And it's a short video about just explaining a little more about what this concept of consultation is. Thank you.
We live in a world of words, but sometimes it can feel like a war of words. All around us, the world seems divided over the issues that affect us all. In politics, the media, online, opposing viewpoints clash as sides attempt to gain support for their arguments. As more people adopt positions, the attacks become more vigorous. Supporters on each side become increasingly entrenched and are unable to find common ground because they are too busy having the argument. Even crucial issues that deeply impact people's lives and their freedoms arouse such passionate arguments that they can be met with equally passionate responses. It seems as if outspoken divisions, hate, threats, and abusive language have become normal ways to express ourselves. And it's hard to see how we can break this cycle of anger and attack. As humanity developed from small farming communities to villages to towns and nation states, so too did our power structures. We want to hold absolute power to account, and over time, kings, emperors, and oligarchs have evolved into democracies. Within democracies, debate is a tool that allows decisions to be made more fairly. Ideas could be pitted against each other to determine which were the best and should be adopted. While this has allowed for a diversity of viewpoints to be expressed, there are challenges. Within this current approach, to test ideas properly, you need opposing viewpoints. Convention dictates that there should be a for and an against, which can result in division. None of us on our own can understand everything. Collectively, we possess a far greater range of knowledge. Harnessing this diversity of perspectives allows us to accomplish things that we have not yet imagined. Yet our current frameworks don't allow us to take full advantage of this richness of understanding. Issues are often oversimplified and we end up in conflict. We lose sight of our collective search for truth. Winning comes first, the truth is secondary. This attitude is like twisting weeds that choke new ideas and block out the light. Solutions remain undiscovered and the debate continues, with both sides shouting louder and louder just to be heard. So, what can we do? Is there a way to include more voices and opinions in our democratic decision-making processes without creating more negative conflict? Is there a way that the concerns, thoughts and ideas of more than just two sides of an argument could be explored while still searching for a collective outcome? A profoundly different approach to finding the truth is consultation. Like debate, consultation puts forward different ideas. But unlike debate, once an idea has been suggested, it belongs to the collective and is thoughtfully discussed without the need for conflict. There is no need to win because no one owns the ideas and no one needs to actively defend them. It is an inherently inclusive process that honors a collaborative search for the truth rather than the supremacy of certain viewpoints over others. Because it is less adversarial, it encourages more voices to join the conversation. There is no either-or, so many ideas bloom and flourish. Anyone can participate. Just bring along a willingness to listen and contribute. Using this positive approach, we can create an environment where we can work together and learn from each other's thoughts and ideas. Consultation gives us a more inclusive path to the genuine search for truth. As we live in times where, in our quest to understand the world and solve the problems we see, the arguments seem to be getting louder and louder and the issues more and more complex. Perhaps we've outgrown debate and need to try something new. Could consultation offer us a way forward? Instead of winning arguments, maybe what we need at this moment is to come together and consult on how to make the world a better place.
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for your presentation on the precious point of unity. That was just lovely, and how to make the world a better place, I think, is where we all are here today to consult and to discover ways how we can create and release this positive society building power. So dear friends, before we move on to John Lindsay, who is our second speaker, we are going to listen to a song sung by Anna Marie Lampau, which will also give us some time to reflect on what we just heard. So Anne-Marie, it is over to you.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Now is the time for you to become as bounteous cup that are filled to overflowing, and even as the reviving current that flows from the upper paradise to scatter the fragrance of my hand across that land. Now is the time for you to become as bounteous cup that are filled to overflowing, and even as the reviving current that flows from the other paradise to scatter the fragrance of my across that land. And even as the reviving God that flows from the other paradise, gather the fragrance of man across that land.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and I know we'll be hearing you later in the program as well. So dear friends, we are now ready to hear our second presenter, Mr. John Lindsay. And he adopted the Baha'i faith as part of his life about 50 years ago. And his motivation was his earnest desire to do something about the state of the world. And he has lived and traveled in many countries and Canadian provinces. He's been married for more than 40 years, and his family includes 5 children who are all grown with their families of their own, and he also has 13 grandchildren. And John will further explore the concept of religion. So welcome, John, and it's over to you. You're on mute, John.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Okay. Have I unmuted myself? I hope. Somebody say yes. Okay, good.
Yes.
Okay. So now I have a slide presentation, and I did send it to our slide master, and I don't know if it's coming back. Oh, looks like it's there. Very good. Okay, so there's the first slide, and I'm just going to ask our slide master if do I push something and then it moves on to the next slide, or are you going to manage that?
You can just say next slide and I'll.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's do it the audio format.
Yeah.
Let me just give me a moment, because I've got to just going to sort of view exit from screen. I want to get something up there on my screen here so I know what slide is next, because I have a bunch of things that are on the same system, but I made a couple edits along the way. And just give me a moment here. And ready. Okay, so World Religion Day. Why do we have religion at all? And that was one of the questions I was asking myself. And as I hope to make the point as we go through this discussion today, that religion is actually a pretty good thing. And the way for us to think about religion, which unfortunately people don't think about it, but just my view, I guess, is that religion is the software that keeps the world running. And it's a great collective system, and it's got, as you'll see, we have some graphics coming up that will explain it in those terms. And by the way, I don't know how to write a line of code, so don't think that I'm any kind of a systems or software expert. I'm not, but I use this stuff all the time. So next slide. So in words, as an expression of why we're going to have this religion in our lives, the cause of God being the what God wants to happen in this world of being over a long period of time. The latest manifestation, Baha'u'llah, states that the purpose for which mortal men have from utter nothingness, just that one phrase, utter nothingness, is pause for thought, stepped into the realm of being, is that they may work for the betterment of the world and live together in concord and harmony. So I think that pretty much sums up what we're trying to achieve with religion. And by the way, everything we're going to look at today, unlike Pat's discussion, I have stolen from the latest report from the Universal House. I think just about everything. It's a pattern of mine. Steal from the very best, and you're always on the right track. Okay, next slide, please. So, as an example of world religion and the power that it has, why World Religion Day? And you have to be asking the question, is there any progress that's been made? Well, actually, that's happened. And in this slide here, we see some statistics which are very powerful. And you see here at the very top line is the number of people in extreme poverty since in 1950. It was about 2 billion. And the extreme poverty in 2015, it was 1 billion. And yet there's many, many more people on the world today than there was in 1950. And the people, flip side of the same question, not in extreme poverty in 1950 was about 2.5 billion. And today it's about 7.2 billion. So we are making progress, and we'll get into the spiritual and economic well-being aspect of a religion in a few more slides. So another stat that I tumbled onto is the percentage of the world population that was in extreme poverty and illiterate in 1820. It was about 90%. I mean, that's just, it's unthinkable, but that was the state of the world at that time. 200 years later, in 2020, it's only 10%. So we're making progress, and things are slowly changing, but there's still much more change to be made along the way. And by the way, the source of all these stats, I stole them from the Fraser Institute. So that's the source. Next slide, please. So again, on this theme, why have a World Religion Day? Because I mean, as Pat mentioned, it started out in 1950, and it was something to be celebrated, and we have to be asking ourselves, well, what's the next stage? And here's more of my thieving here on the screen here, and I direct quote: building society that consciously pursues its collective purpose is the work not only of this generation, but of many generations to come. Now, the point of that little paragraph there, or these few phrases just so far, is we're speaking about time. And we're going to come back to this time theme in a couple of slides. So we have to be thinking about time in different ways. And Baha'u'llah's followers welcome all who labor aside them in this undertaking. So it's not just we Baha'is doing this thing, it's got to be we, humanity. And it means learning about how to raise up vibrant, outward-looking communities. It means those communities have to be learning how to bring about spiritual and material progress. Pat mentioned this a little bit earlier. You can't have one without the other. And having extreme poverty at 90% down to 10% over 200 years, that's an indication that at least we're making some sort of progress. He's learning how to contribute to the discourses that influence the direction of that progress. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is a slide that's kind of oblique, but I'll see if I can make some headway with it. And it's about history and context of time. This particular shape, this arc shape, is a way for us to think about time, and it's somewhat influenced by the fact that two things. One of them is that this particular arc shape is a very, very powerful tool in architecture and engineering. It keeps things up, working and running, and does all kinds of great things. And we'll look at this in a different way in a moment. But it is also because of our point of view on time. We are born, we mature, we pass on to the next world. We tend to think of this arc as being the arc of our lives, and that it doesn't really pack a punch because we're on this world for such a short space of time. But if this is time, this is development, we have to be looking at things in a different way. We're going to see that here in the next slide. But before we get there, I just wanted to point out that there's a different way to view time, and I'm going to mention that in the very next slide. So just now, please, the next slide. Okay, so Pat mentioned this. She mentioned some of the great cathedrals of Europe. And in that slide we just looked at, we saw these arcs here. Well, these arcs are architectural supports that keep upright these vast cathedrals that were built in Europe. And the same thing, they're just been turned vertically or almost vertically rather than horizontally, but they still work. So there's another way to look at the same thing. But it's in the next slide, which we can see now, please, is the one where things get very, very interesting. So, by the way, apologies to the Zoroastrians in the crowd. I misspelled Zoroaster. It's only one R and not two. So here we are here with our time. It's moving along in the development of civilization. Let me start with Zoroaster. So one of the things you can see, if you look carefully, is every time one of these manifestations of God comes to the earth, there is a jump in the development of the world. And Zoroaster is going way, way back. Moses, he was way back there as well, thousands of years from today. And then this is a little bit different. We have the Hindu messengers, and I've listed them as many as I could. They actually have many more than this, but they're listed there. And every time you see them coming with the message that they prescribe, the world civilization takes a jump in development. And we have some other information that we'll see in a couple of slides. And same thing that happened with Jesus. The same thing will happen with Muhammad and the Bab, and the Bab in particular. And you'll notice here that Baha'u'llah, who's the current manifestation I have here in blue and white stripes, indicating that that's the dispensation that we're in at the moment, but it's not completed yet. It's still unfolding. So we have to be thinking of a rolling time and in process rather than lockstep and two bookends on the shelf. So let me get back to this other aspect of things here. We've established, I hope, that the indigenous prophets of the Americas, Pat mentioned them. There was a Baha'i scholar who figured out there's been about 700 of them, and going back thousands of years. And because they have a different way of viewing the world, and I'm going to mention that in two ways. Both they have an oral tradition rather than a written one, and because of their perspective on time, it's different than what we see on the right here with these other manifestations. So that's kind of a linear construct, and with time and development taking place, where the global construct of the indigenous peoples is just different. And an example of that can be seen in language. It's important, and this is an indicator why that it's very important for us to be connected with the indigenous people because of their perspective, and because they have a different way of viewing on things, and it helps. So here's two examples. One of them is there's the Hopi Nation has in their language has a way of speaking about objects. They describe them in a process of time. So if they were to say, well, there is a table, in other words, a table in front of me, it's the way that they say it indicates that they are saying it this way. They are saying there is a something, being a something, at the moment. In other words, they see the whole process of atoms coming together, being something, and then dissolving and recycling later. That's how their perspective is. And another example of this global and future-looking time construct is I found out just today that the Lakota people in the Dakotas, they actually pray for generations that have not come to the earth yet, and they want to consult about, well, what can we do in our community so that those generations, when they come, will have the means and the tools to do something with their lives. So they haven't even, as Baha'u'llah mentioned, stepped into this mortal frame yet, and out of complete nothingness, and yet still they're praying for them. So very, very interesting perspective. Okay, so let's move on. But the point here is that I have the indigenous peoples a little bit separate from the linear bunch, because it's just an alternative way of seeing things, and they do 700 prophets. They have something definitely to hear about. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are some of the societal contributions from manifestations of God? Well, Moses, his contribution certainly was the 10 Commandments, which became the bedrock of Western civilization. I mean, you really can't have people stealing other people's property, and you can't have people running around killing each other. It's just, you're not going to have a society if you allow that to happen. So his construct was a tribal one. And then with the advent of Christ, we had the city-state format, which rose with Rome and developed for a long period of time until Muhammad came along, and he developed the nation-state, which is a little bit different as well. And Baha'u'llah's way of looking at this is to develop the oneness of mankind as it becomes a global society. So that's a major stumbling block for us. And I'm going to speak about this in analogous terms here in a moment. The oneness of mankind becoming a global society. So on the one time, it's the seeing every individual as part of mankind, and yet becoming a global society that actually works. And you recall, I'm sure, many of you, that when Christ was upon the earth, he asked his followers to become fishers of men, meaning that would his followers attract the people of the earth in their time to a spiritual life, because of certainly the barbarism of those at that time was overwhelming. And so now we're into what, if we follow along with what Baha'u'llah is speaking about here, the individual transformation to enable the oneness of mankind. So there has to be this individual transformation to enable this oneness of mankind to actually take place. And I'm going to sort of wander off the page here and go back to a book that I wrote about all of the manifestations that were listed in the book, Zoroaster and Christ, Muhammad, etc., and what they had contributed to the world. It's written by 3 former Roman Catholics who all became Baha'is, but who are Baha'i scholars. And I read this with great interest. Just to give you an idea of the research they had done on this, 750 footnotes in their book they put together, and they detailed the contributions of each one of these manifestations that has come along to us. And it occurred to me that, it's kind of like, I don't know how many of you have traveled by car across Canada. I've done it a number of times, right from one coast to the other. And we really do have a fantastic, beautiful country that is described as vast by one of our dear friends in Europe. and truly is vast. And it occurred to me that it's the way to think about this and how these manifestations have come along and what they have done is that at every city, if you start out in Halifax and you move, your next major stop might be Montreal, which is a long haul all by itself. And then you might move on to Ottawa. If you think of this, each one of these stops is finding out about each one of the manifestations of what they did and the evidence of their lives and what they had done in each one of these cities. Pretty soon, you've left Ottawa and you're traveling on the north side of Lake Superior, fantastic vistas, and you leave the boreal forest and you're onto the prairies and you go through Winnipeg and Regina or Saskatchewan, and then finally at some point you get to Calgary. And if you're driving west on the Trans-Canada Highway, there is a point out there somewhere and I remember the very first time I saw it. You come up over a rise, and there before you is this massive wall of rock called the Rocky Mountains. And that's where we are. Of course, we're familiar with that and know where that is. Well, to my mind, thinking about this, that's where we are just now. We are in this, as described in this particular book. It's always pays to steal from the best, and that's what I'm describing here. We're in a valley called the Valley of Wonderment, which has unfolded and continues. But the problem of this massive rock face that goes for thousands of miles in front of us, it's thousands of meters high from the ground. It's hundreds of miles deep, and it is solid rock. And there's just no way that you can make your way through that easily. You have to make changes before you can traverse such a massive global geographic feature. And that's where we're at. We have to think about, well, how do we do this? How do we get through this massive pile of rock? And that's where this transformation comes in. If we can make the transformation take place in ourselves, then we will get to the point where we can enable the oneness of mankind. So think about being in Calgary, looking at that massive rock, and how are we going to go through it? And that's what we have to do, because unless we get our individual transformation to take place, the oneness of mankind is just not going to get there. So next slide, please. So what we're going to have to do is find some enkindled souls. By the way, that was in that discussion paper that came to us earlier this month. And now the Bahá'í explains that the more the qualities of cooperation and mutual assistance are manifested by people, the more that the human society will advance progress and prosperity, which is what we want. And we're looking for enkindled souls who are committed to the prosperity of all. Got to find those enkindled souls, recognizing that the welfare of individuals rests in the welfare of society at large. They are loyal citizens who eschew partisanship. You recall earlier that Pat was speaking about this partisanship thing, and they just, the eschew means they just don't want any part of it. They're just going to push that aside. And the contest for worldly power. So they don't want anything to do with that. They want to work in a different paradigm. Next slide, please. So World Religion Day, one paragraph. Now, there's a lot of text here, and I'm going to go through it as slowly as I possibly can, because there's just so much here that tells us the exact and specific direction. So enkindled souls are conscious of the forces of materialism, and that they are at work around them, and that their eyes are wide open to the many injustices that persist in the world. Injustice in the world today is just very grave. Yet they are equally clear-sighted about the creative power of unity and humanity's capacity for altruism. They see the power that true religion possesses to transform hearts and overcome distrust. And so with confidence in what the future holds, they labor to cultivate the conditions in which progress can occur. They share their beliefs liberally with others. Beliefs here has got to be their point of view. However, they remain respectful of the freedom of conscience of every soul. I'm going to repeat that again. They remain respectful of the freedom of conscience of every soul. In fact, it's so important that I'm going to say it a third time, that they remain respectful of the freedom of conscience of every soul. And they never impose their own standards on anyone. And while they would not pretend to have discovered all the answers, they are clear what they have learned and what they will still need to learn. Their efforts advance to the alternating rhythm of action and reflection. Setbacks leave them unfazed, and in places where growing numbers are helping to build communities of this character, the power of the cause to transform people's social existence as well as their inner lives is becoming increasingly visible. Earnest pursuit of the plan's central aim, we are sure will cause many, many communities to emerge. So that's the power of World Religion Day in one paragraph. That is what we're doing, why are we doing it, how we're doing it, with whom we will do it. All there in one paragraph. Next slide, please. So the good news is that societal building tools exist and are being used around the world. These tools are unique, powerful, and transforming. From one of the comments from one of our animators, the junior youth group that was run out of our household, I had a slight participation in it. I'll get to that in a moment. Mostly because my dear wife Dolores was running herd on this bunch. And our religion has nothing like this, is what this animator said. And it's an interesting comment, because I remember this gaggle of girls that I would drive home when we would have these things, and like this complete chaos in the back seat with these girls, and all of a sudden the transformation took place, and now they are young women who are staking out a point of view, and they have the tools with it. And that's where this comment from. She said, our religion, because she's not a Baha'i, has nothing like this. So that's part of the good news. And the source of it all, of course, is the manifestation of God for our times is Baha'u'llah. So he has something we can work with. Next slide, please. The bad news. The bad news is that there aren't enough Baha'is. The world aches with grave injustice. It's just, it just aches with it. And the forces of pandemics, political instability, technological advance, climate change, just to name a few, are major stumbling blocks, unless, next slide, please. Did I say next slide, please? Oh, there it is. Enkindled souls can be found in great numbers. So for those folks attending today who are not Baha'is, and even for the Baha'is who are online, please ask your communities that they'd like to find out more about how we can cooperate and work together to transform the world using our combined efforts and tools designed for this purpose. The Baha'is cannot do this without the enkindled souls of all of the world's religious communities. They must be enkindled souls, otherwise there's just no point. You do not have to become a Baha'i. Just show up with your enkindled self. That's enough. We can all work with that. Let's all work together to transform the world so that the oneness of mankind can take place. So we are making progress, and we have to make additional progress. And just to sort of wrap things up here on how much progress that we are making, consider that today we have a world court, and we take these characters, miscreants, and the evildoers into the world court, and they are processed. We have a World Bank. We have an International Monetary Fund. We have UNICEF, which provides education and other services to children around the world. We have the World Health Organization. We have military alliances like NATO and others that are keeping the peace. There has not been a major war in Europe for over 70 years. And we have IATA, the large organization for international air transport. We have the SWIFT system, and we have the United Nations. It's not perfect, but at least it's a start. So that's the end of my presentation today. If there are any questions, then I guess we can get into it. And I think I'm getting the hook because Anne-Marie is coming online here.
Thank you very much, John. I think we'll save the questions for after the breakout groups. And actually, we are going to post the questions for the breakout groups shortly, while this young gentleman, Nason Imani, is going to play a couple of piano pieces for us while we reflect. So Nason, if you could let us know what the pieces are, that would be lovely as you are getting ready.
Okay, so today I'm going to be playing Land of Many Waters and Golden Dreams.
Thank you so much. Wow, wonderful. It takes a lot of courage to play live like that. So good job, Nason. We always enjoy your piano playing and keep practicing. So dear friends, we're going to move on to the breakout groups. And the breakout groups are not being recorded. So I think the questions are in the chat, and there is no need to come back to take notes or to report back. However, if during your conversations there are certain questions that arise and you would like to address them to our two speakers, then that will be the time to do it. So we are going into a random breakout groups, and you could end up with Lori, you could end up with Elizabeth, or with Eva, or with Howie. So enjoy. We'll see you soon in 30 minutes.